Hey practitioners, welcome back to Functional Medicine 2.0. I am Dr. Z, so excited to be here with you today. Our topic today is functional medicine loves labs, I mean, we do too, but it forgets people, and here's why patients stay stuck. And in the house with me today, I have nurse practitioner Marcia Jones. Thanks for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, so glad you're here. Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, just a brief intro?
Absolutely. I am Marcia Jones. I'm a nurse practitioner. I have been doing, healthcare for about 30 years. I've been in functional medicine for a little over 5, 6 years now, and transitioning out of traditional healthcare into functional medicine because I believe it does a lot more for patients and makes a bigger difference in their health overall.
I love that. I love that so much. So what do you think about this topic here? We're indicting functional medicine 1.0. There's certainly good things about it. I was trained in that system. You probably got some of that yourself too,
Mhm.
Marcia. And I love learning like the root cause, and I do love labs, but it sort of made this promise of just order every lab under the sun, find the root cause, that'll fix everything. And once that patient sees the labs, they'll do the work. And then real life, we get there and no, everyone's an individual and they all respond differently, right?
Exactly. And actually, this topic is very near and dear to my heart because this is the way I work. This is the way I practice. I like to look at the patient's story. I believe the story comes first. We can do every lab under the sun, but you have to know where you're going. You can't just order this battery of testing and you're going to confuse everyone. You're not going to know where
Mhm.
to start. You don't know what to do. So you listen to the story first and then get the labs that matter the most that you think are really going to dig in and then go from there. It kind of does a stepwise approach with the patient and keeps them from getting overwhelmed, as well as the practitioner who's trying to figure out what's really going on at the bottom.
That's true. Sometimes, and they're usually paying out of pocket for it. So
Mhm.
you don't want to order something that maybe you didn't need because that's money you're paying for. And sometimes they might order so much, they're just overwhelming. They don't even know how to triage care, right? They don't know where to start. So there's how does it impact you clinically? And then even the operational load. How do you do visits with that patient? How does your staff help you and support you? And so, yeah, I'm a big fan of listening also to the patient. They bring so much to the table with that story, and then even spreading the labs out.
Mhm.
Whatever's needed, so we can work a bit on it. Have you ever had this situation? I know I have, where you get a patients. They're obviously not the same people, but they seem similar. Maybe it's women, and they're all mid 40s, and they all have thyroid issues. The labs look similar, and yet not only are the instructions different, but even where it seems the same, people respond differently. Like they have different bandwidths for what they can hear and what they can handle. Do you see that?
Absolutely. And that's part of getting the story. The foundation, everything is that first initial visit. Of course, we start with consultations, but that first visit really sets the stage. You have to be able to read your patient. You have to know what their capacity is, what they can handle, how to work with them, and yeah, bite sizes. Some people are all like, I got this, I've done a ton of research and I'm ready. And they know what they want from the get-go. And even them, you still have to kind of like reel them back in a little bit and go, okay, let's start slow because you cannot change everything all at once. So
No.
you have to be mindful of it. And I always tell the patient I'm trying to respect them and I want to respect their finances as well because even if they have limitless funds, what's the point? Because
Right.
your testing is going to change also based on which way you approach what's happening. So it always starts with the patient first.
Yeah, especially serum tests, right? Blood's a moment in time. So
Hmm.
what do we really need to order? When are we going to retest? Where do we go from here? I love that. Some of these lessons, because we weren't taught this. So some of these lessons were like hard, earned over the years. I remember having God, I had some patients. I had one who was so extreme, so sensitive that, and she had already gone through all the other practitioners. No one knew how to work with her. And it's like we started with like one supplement where you opened it and she dipped her pinky in and put it under her tongue. Like that was it. That was the amount of sensitivity we're dealing with. And how many people would understand how to work with that human being? And then I had the like gung ho, like we're going to boot camp this thing. I've got 30 years of misery, but I'm going to take 2 weeks off of work and we're going to solve everything in this time. Well, wouldn't that be nice? And I remember another patient who was like, I'm totally overwhelmed. I don't even want to go in the portal. I want an email with one sentence in an 18-point font, and I want one thing to do. And so these are all real stories. And so learning how to work with these people taught me so much about what does it take. First of all, that people weren't being listened to. They were
Mhm.
so not getting served in their, 5-minute PCP visit. And what it took to actually get them to move forward a few steps so they could really, get their health back and see the big vision. I don't know. You have any, is it
Yeah,
just me?
and no, you're so right. And there's so many people that they've been misunderstood for so long, or just like you said, not listened to, that you have to recalibrate them to what functional medicine actually is. You've got to pull them back and almost detox them from that horrible experience. That no, we're not going to shove everything at you in 5 minutes and expect you to absorb it and see you again in 6 months. And you got to make it happen on your own until we see each other again. That's
Right.
so hard for people. So I try to like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to start with step one. And then we're going to move to the next phase. And we're not going to go ahead of ourselves until it's time. And it's there.
Yes.
And I promise that I'm going to hold their hand through it too. I'm like, all right, listen, we're
Yeah.
not doing anything crazy. We're going to do this together. And that's such a foreign concept.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to hear
I,
something be,
yeah, I was gonna say, I was guilty of this a little bit in the past. In fact, Lori, Lori, nurse
Mhm.
practitioner, director of clinical care, she said she was guilty about it too. But coming from that FM 1.0 model, it was like, okay, coming from viewing through a traditional lens, then if we're going to work with the patient now in functional medicine, we might use some different tools, but it was sort of the same model, and
Mhm.
learned really quickly, wait, that won't work. That's too overwhelming. And so I see that a bit with some practitioners new to functional medicine, that it's like, okay, I'm doing functional medicine now, but I'm going to do it just the way I did primary care,
Right.
or just the way I did crisis care. And it's like, no, we've got people in front of us, real human beings. And it's just a completely different story as far as what their capacity is. And I went from like, I still love the deep dive in the beginning, but I went from making it super long to thinking about that whole initial time I work with them, that I'm going to keep unfolding more about them visit to visit. And then I definitely changed. I have to order all tests immediately to let me spread it out. Let's see what we need. Let's test some things, not just test the lab, but test their response and see what happens. And sometimes the lab I thought I'd need, 2 months later, it was like, we don't actually need that
Mhm.
anymore. But I didn't order it right up front. And then I used to have a huge report of findings. I definitely don't do that anymore. I see the whole initial time period as like an ongoing report of findings. It's like we have our initial assessment, we see what's going on, we have a place to start, and then another piece reveals itself.
Mhm.
Maybe the patient tells another part of the story that they didn't get out in the beginning because no one ever asked them and they didn't think about it. And it was 15 years ago, but that was actually the real milestone before after moment. And then the crazy thing I found is it actually becomes more affordable for patients, because I really looked at and measured what happened over the course of a year versus what would happen in like a 4 or 5 month period when it approached it this way. But they were able to handle it and get better results. So definitely, I was guilty of that to begin with, and I changed
Yeah.
my approach.
Same. When I first started doing it, I was so excited about all that I had learned about the advanced testing, and I wanted to do everything. But some people, it's just they've never even had a good panel of blood work.
Right.
So simply starting with a full thyroid panel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They've never had hormones tested before. Let's just take a look at it and let's help you to understand what these tests mean, because none of them have ever been explained. They get that standard, oh, your tests are all normal. Here you go.
Yep.
And so they don't understand the concept of having somebody sit down and actually go through these basic things.
Yeah,
And
or
then,
even look at them differently. Like one I bring up a lot is like fasting insulin. It's so rarely ordered, and yet
right.
it tells you so much about where that patient's heading. What if you want to get glycomark or adiponectin or C-peptide, or, get leptin, right? There's so much more to look at, and the patient's like, "What? This has never been done before."
Yeah,
I
right.
thought I thought I was just supposed to eat less and move more. Like, well, how's that working for you?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Not working out so well. Oh, yeah. Opening their eyes. It's so fun though to do functional medicine, to be able to do it this way, because you just, every time you talk to them, if you're doing it right, you just see their face light up with these aha moments. And every little step brings them progress. They're not used to that. Like
Yeah.
if you do it that way, they don't burn out. You don't burn out. You both get to kind of like walk
100%.
that journey together and get true outcomes.
I talk to the public and the patient community too, in our other channel, Diagnose This, and I try to tell them, whether it's functional medicine, traditional medicine, conventional, whatever, we work for you, right? It doesn't matter whether your insurance is paying or you're paying cash, we work for you. And we have a lot we need to guide you through. And we certainly have our expertise, and that's why you're there and paying for it. But you're the expert in your body, right? You're the one who's been living in that body for all these years. And I know you've heard me say it, but I always try to teach practitioners, believe them. It's weird that we should have to even educate that,
I,
right? But there are some very rare situations where someone exaggerates it or not tells the truth. But the vast majority of the time, you should just assume they are telling you the truth. And I
Mhm.
find a lot of people aren't taught that.
No, I mean, and I can say, so from my own story and journey, how I got into functional medicine, I was a provider and I was having crazy symptoms that I couldn't put together, which of course puts you in panic mode that the worst case scenario is happening. So I'm going to
Right.
colleagues that I've worked with for years who know me and, know that I'm not crazy or whatever women are called. And they finally come down with let's give you an antidepressant. I don't want an antidepressant. Listen, like finally figuring out that it was adrenal fatigue, but that came from the story and putting the
Mm-hmm.
things together. So it didn't even take a lab really. Once I learned, started learning functional medicine and the difference in things and what to actually look for and what was really happening,
Mm-hmm.
it was from literally working myself up in my career. But colleagues that I respected, they just blew me off.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's kind of where I changed my whole perspective on everything. And I still manage that way. Why the labs have to make a difference, why I have to listen to the story, why you kind of have to have an inside thought of what's happening before you even order the test.
Yeah.
Test, I was
Oh,
always taught, test confirm what you think is happening.
right.
You don't just throw every test out there under the sun to figure it out.
No.
You've got to have an idea. That's part of being a practitioner.
Well, and the idea of adrenal issues, gosh, medical community hates that.
Hmm.
Endocrinologists absolutely despise it. It's like, no, it's Cushing's or it's Addison's, and that's it. And it's like, no, not always. I mean, we
Right.
do find Cushing's and Addison, but it's far less common. But HPA axis dysregulation, fine. There's your ugly name. That just
Yeah.
does not roll off the
No,
tongue.
it
That's
doesn't.
what's happening. But patients understand adrenal fatigue, and endocrinologists say, oh, no, that's not real. No, it is real. They are very much experiencing it. You need to address it just because they're not on opposite extremes of the bell curve in a disease state. We have a huge majority of people here who are burnt out on life and society and overworking, and they've got so many hormones, not just adrenals, but blood sugar regulation. They're not communicating. They might have gut dysbiosis. You got to look at the whole picture. But because
Hmm.
it doesn't fit in your box of
Hmm.
Addison's or Cushing's, nothing's wrong. I mean,
Yeah.
literally, I've
I,
heard practitioners say that, and I'm
and
like, let's go take a walk through your own research. Let's get out a textbook. Here's a lab, and the education that you have to do for a practitioner who's caught in that paradigm. Like I said, the research demonstrates it, but that doesn't boil down to your average endocrinologist. And so we're out here trying to educate
mhm.
practitioners. What's the general public supposed to do? They're going to go in there and see that endocrinologist and get told everything's fine.
Yes. And that was the situation that I was in. And that's why I have a passion now to make sure that doesn't happen to anyone who's in my care. Because
Yes.
I saw it from the other side. And I'm like, this isn't good. We can't do this to people. And
No, no,
the
no, no. Do you know how many practitioners I've already talked to on this podcast that are all medical providers in traditional medicine that were completely gaslit by their colleagues?
yeah.
It's nuts.
Yeah. The
Because
endocrinologists. Oh,
if you'll
sorry.
do that to a nurse practitioner, if you'll do that to a physician, if you'll do that to a PA, what are you going to do to, Mama Smith who comes in and doesn't have the words, but just says,
Exactly.
I can't crawl out of bed?
Hmm. Can't advocate for themselves whatsoever. And I hear the worst stories now about the way people are treated.
Mm.
When they go into these specialist office, like, "What do you want me to do about it?" They literally say things to them like that, and it's like, no, listen to their story. Don't just call them crazy because they read a book or they saw something that said something about the HPA dysfunction. Listen to them. But
Yeah,
we're
they come in with a word you don't like, and so you're like, "They don't know anything," or they come in from Joe's blog, and here's what I would teach, especially working with scholar character codes. You know some of this,
yeah.
and other people are like, "What the heck you're talking about?" But this is a personality, profile, and I would see a lot of scholars where they're so upset at their primary care physician because, first of all, they have too little time, and they talk a bit at a slower cadence, and so they can't advocate for themselves, so they try to bring something in, and sometimes it's good information and sometimes it's baloney information, but they're trying to advocate for themselves, right? So they walk in with Joe's blog or whatever, and they're completely dismissed and shut down by
Mhm.
that provider, and then that person's angry, and
Mhm.
then they are like, "I'm never going back to the doctor again." Well, that's not the answer either, right? And so one of the ways I would teach practitioners is like, you need to meet them where they are. Let's say they brought in baloney information. You can still say, like, I respect that you are asking why, you're digging in and trying to find an answer. Let me show you how I look at it. So then without saying to someone who's already been burnt so many times, "Hey, you're just wrong," it can be like, "I respect that you're searching for answers. Here's what I see." And then you can bring them, the legitimate perspective. But what a way to win over a patient right away that's been
Mhm.
dismissed, you know?
Absolutely. And, unfortunately, most of the patients that we attract in functional medicine, at least the ones I do, they're so skeptical from the beginning. They have been through so much that you really have to almost win them over before you can ever start treating them. There's
Oh, yeah.
so much you have to wipe out and gain their trust for them to comply and make progress. And that's horrible.
100%. And that's why we're here talking about this, guys. Okay, so all my practitioners out there, functional medicine 1.0 was just run a bunch of labs, explain some abnormalities. If you can get the root cause, excellent, and then defend your protocols. It almost like pits you against the person. No, no, no. So it ignored the capacity, it ignored how to triage, it ignored biohacking human behavior, it glorified explanation and completely forgot execution. So functional medicine 2.0 is different. You have to be able to be decisive. You have to be a leader. You have to focus on transformation, recognizing who's in front of you, respect them as a human being. And by the way, they probably each need different answers. And then also, I know you do this because you run a clinic, but build a system around you that's going to support you in this. Because I think that's when practitioners also get burnout with the process and what it takes, because functional medicine is a higher demand. But you need to build, office staff, operations, systems that's going to support you in this kind of care.
100%. Yeah. I've built that same thing, the system where not every person is the same. Everybody's going to need a different approach. And that's what makes functional medicine what it is each person needs a different approach. But you still have to have something that guides you, like understanding it and, teaching them based on the results and taking them step by step through a system that can accommodate, but yet still stay streamlined.
Yes, 100%. It's a skill set. It's something we teach every day. So just remember, okay? So as we wrap up here, we know functional medicine loves labs. We love them too, but don't overdo them, especially in the beginning. Be very specific, precise about what you order and when. Don't forget the person in front of you. As Marcia was saying, that history is so important. And then also, what we talk about a lot with FM2 is how do we biohack human behavior? What's their capacity? What's the cadence? They need to get an outcome, right? So it's very
Mhm.
important. Functional medicine is so good. It has so much to offer. But if we stay stuck in FM 1.0, it's going to give it a bad name. We
Mhm.
got to do FM 2.0. People have to know that this is where they have a safe, soft landing, not only to be heard and taken seriously, but that you can help orchestrate a plan custom to them and really architect a life that will allow for this change because it's so much better on the other side.
Mhm.
So, Marcia, thank you so much for
Yeah.
being here. For our listeners, this is Functional Medicine 2.0, less data dumping, more direction. And if patients aren't changing, the problem isn't motivation, it's the leadership. We can do better. So that's our call. Let's do it. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.